everyone, welcome back to Featherstitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I make videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. If you're new here, you're so very welcome, and if you are a returning visitor, thank you so much for coming back. Your support really does mean the world to me. We're starting a new panel today as it's the first Sunday in November, and in the UK we have just put our clocks back. The last Sunday in October we start daylight saving, and that means that our evenings have suddenly got very, very dark indeed. There's something really cosy about it for me, and the moment that the clocks go back I start thinking about the run up to Christmas, about comfort, about cozying down and enjoying these quieter winter months. I do sometimes wonder whether we ought to really hibernate through the winter as human beings, because there's something naturally cosy and sleepy about this time of year. So with that in mind, I thought we would focus on hibernation this month. Last month we did some really simple silk shading or thread painting using a felt background to cover all our mistakes and fill in all the gaps. And it was so popular that I thought I would do something that's maybe the next step on. So if you've grown in confidence from doing the mushroom panel, I think we're going to take it a little step further today. We're going to take away that felt background. Now the best way to move your thread painting on is to start with a really textured creature. I wonder if you can guess where this is going. We're going to start with some sketching and then we're going to move on to some thread painting. So gather your bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
I think my natural state is hibernation, really. I think I could get on board with a world where we hibernated in the winter. I did a bit of research and discovered there are only 2 species in the UK that actually fully hibernate. Why not have a guess? Pause the video, tell me in the comments what you think they are, and then restart the video and we'll see if you're right. Okay, wonder if you guessed right. So the first creature that hibernates in the UK is the dormouse. And the second species is the hedgehog. Now, I also saw a bit of a documentary the other week that talked about the critical state of the hedgehog population in the UK, and they used to be everywhere. When I was a kid, it was really common to see hedgehogs, and they are dying out, loss of habitat, they get killed on the roads, and it's really unusual to see hedgehogs these days. So I thought we would stitch a hedgehog. Now, if you're not in the UK, you can substitute this with whatever creature you like, but we're going to have a go at drawing a hedgehog. I have a jam pot lid here, it's quite a large one, and I'm going to put a circle at the centre of my window. So this is 24 centimetres by 16, and hopefully I can show you the simple approach to sketching a hedgehog. So here's my outline. This is roughly the size of the hedgehog that I'm going to include, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify a sort of rough triangle. So let's put 3 markers in that mark the points of a triangle. So 1, 2, 3. This is going to be the hedgehog's nose, and this is going to be its 2 ears. Okay, so what we're going to do is very gently we're going to sketch. I'm going to have to go a bit stronger so you can see it, a curvy line here like that, and then we're going to use these curves to guide us a little bit. So I'm going to do another curve just below and another curve just below here like that, and I'm going to take this curve down to the point, down like that, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So this is, we're just getting in a rough idea of some key shapes. What we've got here is the rough shape of the face of the hedgehog. I know it doesn't look like much yet. Right, inside these two curves I'm going to put a circle. So 1, 2, and you could use a circle template if you wanted to. You want them roughly the same size. That's going to be our hedgehog's eyes, and if you want to, you can colour those in, leaving a little white circle where the light is catching. Right, now hedgehogs have very kind of rectangular noses, so this is going to be the bottom of the nose. We're going to come out a little way either side of that point, and we're going to put in a little square. There we go. So that is our hedgehog nose, and this is going to be where the ears go. So we've got the base of the ear here, and we're going to put a little dome out to the side. So this here is our original marker to mark that triangle. We want our ear to end at that marker and come back in just beyond the peak of that curve, and we want a sort of rounded ear, and if you want to, you can make that slightly more pointed but not too much more. And then we want to do the same again the other side. So we've got our two ears, and then we're going to put a little dome inside that, and we can shade that in. That's the hollow of the ear. Hedgehogs' faces tend to be quite light around this section and much darker around here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some sketch lines coming out from the nose, following that line, and they're going to fan towards the eye. And when we get to the eye, we're going to curve them kind of around that eye. So just small lines curving out, and that's where we start blending out that line out towards the ear. So go a little way above that curved line. So we're already starting to look a little bit more hedgehoggy. So once you have got some shading, we're going to darken up just to the side of that nose, and we can come in and we can round off that nose a little bit. So now I want to create a little bit of shape here. So just almost like the brow here. And I'm going to fan those lines out as they go around the hedgehog's head, around his face. So I'm starting pointing in the direction of that ear, and as I come to the centre of the face, I'm getting more vertical and then going out to the edge. I'm going to have to turn my paper a little bit. Now as we go out to the ear, we're going to keep our lines fanning like that. We can darken up the ear a bit, particularly that sort of the ear hole, like that. And I want to do the same on the other side. Now, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but I've done some lines that follow around and some that go straight up towards the ear, and suddenly that's looking less like fur and more like spikes. Now, this is an eye socket, and so we want this to be a little bit darker here, so we can darken that up, and same on the other side. And we want some shading going just around underneath the eye as well, because we want some texture on that face. Is it looking hedgehoggy yet? I hope it is. Right. Now around the sides of the face, I'm going to turn sideways a little bit. We want to get a sense that these little semi-spikes are fanning out, because hedgehogs are quite round when they're curled up like that. So my lines are going to come out from the nose and out to the side. And then we go over that join to make sure there's not a hard line. And then as we get round the nose, we're going to curve them round like that, almost like they're curving underneath the nose. And then under the nose, we're going to fan out like that. So he's looking very whiskery at the moment, like he's got a bit of a beard. Let's just do a little bit more under this part of the eye, so above the brow ridge, above the eye, he's going to start getting a bit more spiky like that. We're alright so far. Now, once we get beyond the face, the spikes start getting a lot darker, so these are a lot softer, but what we want are some darker spikes around the hedgehog. So at this point we can start pressing on a little bit longer, and I'm just going to press on and make a stroke with my pencil and lighten up as I get to the end. And we're going to follow, just going to extend beyond our guide circle that we started with, and we're going to build up a layer of spikes. Once we've got a rough guide, we're going to go back in again, and we're just going to keep adding spikes, so avoid the temptation to colour backwards and forwards. So we're going to do lots of individual lines. Again, still looking quite spiky, but this is where the magic happens, because what we want to do is have some lines not going in the same direction as the others. So I'm going to put some crosses. I want my crosses to be irregular, and I want some of them to overlap where I've been. So once we've got some crosses in, we can go back in with another set of straight lines, and we want to start blending these a little bit more with the face. So what we're trying to create is a direction for our fur. That's when you can come back in and start adding in some much kind of sketchier lines, just to blend out those guidelines that we started with. Don't be scared of pressing on a bit harder. And where you've had really long lines, you can add in some shorter ones now. So I'm coming back in and just building up a bit of shadow so that we've got a sense of the shape of the hedgehog's face. I'm going to lighten this area up by just rubbing over with an eraser just to lighten it up. There we go. That in essence is a hedgehog. Let me just show you the first one that I did. So I think my triangle was a little bit squatter, but I wanted him a little bit bigger. Now this is a very similar face shape to a badger. It's very similar to a fox in those early stages. So you can, but in essence it's still there. His face is probably a little bit long, so probably could have started the ears a bit lower. Now, why start with drawing when we're going to embroider? Now, I wonder if you can spot what happened as we were sketching. We've basically put in our stitch lines, so we know that we're going to be doing lots of straight stitches, but we're also going to be adding in some cross stitches to make it look more spiky. And we've basically created our guidelines for when we stitch, so we can overlay some tracing paper or another sheet of paper over the top of this. And I'm kind of going to trash my drawing here, but I have got another one. But we can turn this into a pattern. So I'm going to outline the eyes, I'm going to outline the ears, I want to bring the ears a bit lower down, then I'm going to outline the bridge of the nose like this, outline the nose, and then here I'm going to draw some lines that are going to show me which direction I'm going to be stitching in. Be really easy to do this on an iPad if you've got Procreate or something like that. You basically can do a layer over the top of your original sketch, and that tells you what direction your stitches need to go in. So in doing our sketch, we've actually also created a stitch pattern for ourselves to help us understand how to stitch our hedgehog. Okay, so I've got my fabric that I'm going to work on, and I've laid it over my sketch, and I've put a light box just underneath the page that my sketch was on so that I can see through it. I've got my heat erase pen, and what I'm going to do is just sketch and transfer my hedgehog onto my fabric. Obviously I'm not going to redraw it onto my fabric, but I am going to put in the markings that are going to guide me. So where it's going to be darker, I'm going to put more lines. So down that side of the nose, just above the eyes, and then the outer ring of spikes. Now if you don't feel confident drawing, there are hundreds of images. If you do a Google search for your hibernating creature, you can do exactly the same thing. So same principle. You could put any picture underneath and get pretty much the same result. And if you don't have a light box, holding it up to a window would have exactly the same effect. You just want a light source behind. So when I turn the light off, that is what I'm going to be working with. There's my hedgehog on my fabric. I'm just pinning it to some batting, and that's going to enable me to have something like a padded hedgehog. So if you're new here and you're wondering what measurements I'm using, this is roughly 16 centimetres deep by 24 centimetres wide, and I always allow a good amount around the outside because we always put a sort of binding, an edge on to our panels. I've just got some ordinary machine cotton, and I'm just going to tack or baste around the edge. So I'll put my first side in and then I'll start smoothing out the fabric. You can see it's very mobile. So it's just a rough running stitch around the outside, and when I come to do the others I'll just make sure I'm smoothing out the fabric so it's nice and flat, and then I'll take the pins out. So I'm going to do that and then I'll come back. So I've stitched the two pieces together, and I am a little bit concerned because we're going to stitch this really heavily. I am concerned that this is going to get a little bit distorted because my fabric's not very robust. So I've decided I'm going to use a hoop. Now I've got a 5-inch hoop here, and you can see it is big enough for my design to sit inside. Probably could do with a little bit of extra space around it, but I think it will be fine. So what I'm going to do is just loosen this screw at the top and take the ring apart. So an embroidery hoop, the outer ring is one that's got a gap in it and it's held together by 2 brackets. If you're interested, this is a Nerge hoop, a number 2 Nerge hoop. They're really good. And then you've got this solid inner ring. Now the inner ring goes underneath your work, and you want to, hopefully you can see where the edge of that hoop is. You want to get it so that your drawing is centered in that hoop, and then you want to loosen this off and sit it over the top of your inner ring, and then with the flat of your hand we're just going to push straight down like that, and that traps your fabric in the hoop, and then you can tighten it up. Now there's lots of different approaches to this. I think there are some tricks. So the temptation is, as you tighten it, you can see it's puckered a little bit there. So what we need to do is take all the give out of this fabric, and so what a lot of people do is work their way around pulling. I'll do it and show you what happens. So look at what's happening to the hedgehog as I'm pulling. It's all going out of shape, and so there's a better way of doing it. I'm just going to loosen it off because we need to start that process again. What I do is we want to work corner to corner, so rather than working our way around pulling, we're going to take diagonally opposite corners and we're going to pull them into the middle on the back, and then we're going to do exactly the same with the other two corners, and then we're going to tighten up our screw a little bit more. So if it's still puckering at the centre, which mine is, I'm going to do that again. So diagonally opposite corners, we're going to pull into the middle, and the other diagonal, pull into the middle, and tighten up the screw. Now I don't have a lot of hand strength, so I often use a screwdriver, but because I've got some wadding in there, I think I might be okay. So tighten it as much as you can. When it's drum tight, that's where we can go. So I'm starting with black, and the reason I'm doing that is because our eyes have got spikes just brushing over them. So I'm going to start with the eyes now. You can do these in satin stitch if you want to. So let me show you satin stitch. I'm going to start on the outside edge at the centre. I've got 2 strands here, and I'm using an anchor thread. It's 403, and I'm going to go straight across that circle down the other side. I always tend to start in the middle. That's a creepy looking eye. And then what we're going to do is come up again to the top edge of the circle, bring our needle through, and we're going to lay a stitch as close to that first one as possible and pull through. So you can see that's starting to cover the eye. Don't worry about the little white highlight because we'll do that afterwards. And so we come up on the outside edge again, go across the circle and make another stitch right next to it. So you can fill like that. So that's a satin stitch eye. Let me bring it up close. It's hard to see because it's black, but this is just lots of stitches that are lined up against each other. And you can see when I bring it up close, it's not very circular at all, but it works fine. Now, if you don't like satin stitch or feel intimidated by that, let me show you that something far less rigid also works. So what you can do is just work in a circle, and I'm just going to do back stitch. There we go. So 2 little hedgehog eyes, and you wouldn't really notice any difference. So we're not going to stitch this whole hedgehog today. There's too much stitching there to do in one go, but that's the eyes as a starting point. And I think while I've got some black on the go, I'm not going to use a lot of black because it's too strong, and we want this to be a nice sort of gentle autumnal sleepy hedgehog, and black just seems really stark. I'm just going to go just around the outline of that ear hole, so the inner part of the ear, like that. And I might put another couple of stitches in, and it's going to help me build some shadow. So loosely following the curve, but it doesn't have to be too close. So a bit of shading for the ears. And while we're here, let's just get a little bit of black on the outline of the nose as well. All we're going to do is repeat the process that we did with our pencil, but we're going to do it with thread. So we did a kind of cheats thread painting last time, really easy, and because we had the felt underneath, we didn't need to worry about coverage or anything like that because the colour was already there. But this time we're going to try and fill in all the gaps. Although, having said that, I'm quite liking this sketchiness. If I'd coloured in the fabric beforehand, I could quite be tempted to do a really sketchy hedgehog. So if you don't fancy loads of stitching, maybe that's a way forward. You could use some fabric pens or just some watercolour and add some colour to your fabric, and you don't have to have special dyes or anything like that. There's loads of different ways of painting on fabric. Okay, I've got 2 strands of a dark brown. Mine happens to be Anchor 1088, but just use what you have. So this is really quite dark. I don't know whether the camera will pick up that it's anything different to the black, but we'll see. So I'm working my way around the ears now. So again, I'm starting with a back stitch, just sort of outlining the shape. And just like I did with the ear hole, I'm just getting a sense of the shape here. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point. And then I'm going to come in and add some sketchier stitches. So it's essentially back stitch, but I'm not going to worry if they don't join up. And where I did that black earlier on, I'm going to bring in some darker brown. I'm working with 2 strands at the moment to help me cover the space, and then when we start adding detail we might work with a single strand just to get a finer result. So I'm kind of colouring in my hedgehog here just with some stitches. I want to go back to my picture and think, where are the dark spaces? So I'm going to add some sketchy stitches down these 2 nose lines here. So I'll just work on one side at the moment. I'm starting at the nose, and just like we did with our mushrooms, I'm kind of going to do something like a long and short stitch, and we're working in the direction of the lines that we drew. So just like we did when we sketched our hedgehog, we're going to make lots of little lines that create the shape of the animal. So we're getting our basic sketching at the minute. We don't want our lines to all begin and end in the same place. So all those principles that we learnt last month, and if you are new and you didn't see that video, do check out the Winging It 2024 playlist. I'll put a link at the end. It's our October panel. We made some mushrooms, and we did them with a kind of silk shading. And one of the principles that we learnt was to try and avoid creating harsh lines. So we don't want, see how these stitches are all kind of starting and ending in different places. We don't want a line of stitches and then another line and then another line. We want them to kind of all blend together. So I'm just putting a couple more darker stitches, and I want to make that eye socket curve around. So I want some stitches that are going to curve around the top of the eyeball. Like that. So I'm going to, I think, concentrate on this side. So I've been up round the eye. I didn't want a big long trailing thread, so I've just cut my thread, finished it and cut it off, and I want to develop these lines along the bottom. So we did painting with thread last time. I suppose this is sketching with thread. So we're getting our direction of painting in with our stitches. So we're just kind of putting in our line work, I suppose. So here our stitches can be a little bit longer, and they're going to start curling around the bottom of the nose. Like that. So that's showing me the direction that the spikes are going in that way. Now, same dark brown thread, I'm just going around the bottom of the nose, and I'm using smaller stitches here because the nose is going to look smooth rather than, or relatively smooth rather than spiky, so I don't want to enhance spikiness around the bottom of the nose. So I'm just using small back stitches, and when I get to the point where I meet the black, I just want to work to the inside of that black, and I'm going to just add a little bit more coverage in between the outline of black and those smaller stitches that I made just inside. I really hope that after our panel last month you feel a bit more confident, and I know we've taken away the felt here and we're going to have to work to get some coverage, but I hope that you can see already from what I'm doing that actually you don't have to be super precise. We're going to get some really nice results with this, I'm very confident. It's DMC 3860, so this is a sort of, it's got some pink tones in it, and I'm just going to carry on the process just layering up colour. So because this one's a bit lighter, I might just come out onto the nose, the bridge of the nose a little bit as well. So again, I don't want my stitches to all line up, so I'm looking for some gaps in between what I've already stitched, and I'm just putting some stitches in those gaps, but we're still following the same sort of direction. The stitch direction is more important than the stitch itself. Don't worry that the lines look chunky at the moment, it will all work out. I hope that you've learned, if nothing else this year, that the process is the thing. So you just keep going. If you don't like it, it's because it's not finished yet. So if I bring this up a bit closer, I've gone in with a paler thread now. I haven't gone as pale as I want to yet. This is Anchor 392. It's a sort of grey brown, and I'm just carrying on in exactly the same way, just making stitches. So I've done much more underneath the eye here, and I just wanted to show you something that you can do to help the blend, because what we've mostly been doing so far is laying stitches alongside each other, but when you're blending, once you start getting your stitches to be a lot denser, so once a lot of the white space has been taken away, there's another thing that you can do to help with the blend, and that is splitting stitches. So if I just work as close to the camera as I can, so if I put a stitch in here, I could tuck it in next to that dark brown stitch. So I've got a dark brown stitch here. I could make my new stitch go alongside it like that, so move it to the side and take my needle down there, but I can blend it a lot better if I split that stitch. So rather than going alongside it, I'm going to take my needle in between the two strands of thread that make that stitch up. So I'm splitting that stitch open, and then I can come in again at the bottom and split a stitch a little bit further down. And if you do that often, your two-stranded stitches start looking a lot more like single-stranded stitches, because you've got lots of colours going in between each other. So that's another thing that you can do to help blend your threads. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea. Let's just bring in an even lighter colour. Let's just come across the top of the face with this shade. So this is getting towards a light brown, but it's still got quite a lot of colour. So we're just fanning out those stitches, keeping them nice and uneven so that we don't get any harsh lines. It's going to help blend out with the paler colours. Let's get a really nice light brown. So this is Anchor 391, and let's get some of these paler tones in. So we want to blend down into this lower part of the snout. Maybe that's a better word rather than the nose. We can probably still go even lighter, but we're just working our way through the shades. Now at the bottom of this little ear hole, I can make some of my stitches just encroach a little bit on the ear. So I hope that that has given you some principles to work with. Now, this video could be very, very long, and I'm going to pause there because I think what we've done has given you a little bit of a sense of how to proceed. So we've started with the eyes and nose. We've done a little bit of outlining of very specific shapes, so there isn't really any specific shape on the face. It's all gonna come through shading and adding different colours to contour the face. But where you've got an ear or a nose or an eye, you can outline that a little bit before you start stitching, and then the rest is just making lots of straight stitches following our sketch lines. So this is our sketch, these are the lines I drew on, and hopefully if I hold these two next to each other, you can see how I'm using those sketch lines that I drew on to guide the direction that I'm stitching in. And as we get out to the side, these stitches are going to be a lot longer, but we'll add in the detail and we'll smooth this out a lot more next week. So I'm going to carry on working on that. I'll try and add some photos at the end to show you how it's looking as I fill in that space, but that should be plenty to get you going. So we've looked at how to draw our hedgehog to start off with, how to turn that drawing into a guide for our stitching. We've transferred our drawing onto our fabric, put it in a hoop, and then we've started adding tone and shade to start building up the layers of our hedgehog. So I hope that you have some fun creating your sketch of your hibernating animal. I'm doing a hedgehog. Feel free to do a hedgehog or do something more appropriate to wherever you are in the world. Have loads of fun. Can't wait to see what you get going with. Do post and share your work. You can either use our Facebook group, which is there's a link in the description below, or you can post to Instagram using hashtag FSHWingingIt24, and don't forget to tag me at Featherstitch House, and that way I'm more likely to see what you've created. So have fun creating your hibernating animal sketch with thread, and I will see you again next week for the next stage in our November panel. Take care and have a ton of fun with your stitching. I'll see you soon. Bye.